What's going on, everyone? Welcome to a Tuesday edition of Back Your Play with Q. I'm your host, as always, Rich Quinones, hashtag BYP. Check out the YouTube channel, Rich Q on Q. You can check also the BYP radio and the BYP best of as the NFL. Well, we've been saying it for the past several weeks. We are getting closer and closer. Our NFL Insider, our good friend, our correspondent, Lloyd Vance, kind enough to join us on a Tuesday edition of BYP. Countdown day has come and gone on this Tuesday, 4 o'clock. And listen, this is pretty much it. Now, you'll see a little movement, obviously, with some of these rosters, Lloyd, but I'm just wondering at first glance, any surprises that stood out for you when it came to some of these players getting cut, where most of them, if any, some notable guys, I'm sure they'll find a home. It might take a while, but any player or two or team surprise you or stand out?
Well, I would say probably the biggest surprise is the number of these teams are going with only two quarterbacks.
Mm-hmm.
And nowadays, you're getting a situation where guys are getting hurt, and the next thing you know, you have like the NFC Championship game
That's right.
where you're pulling the emergency quarterback off the bench who may not even be a quarterback. So
Right.
that was surprising. But it was mostly veteran type guys that signed value add contracts and they kind of step away from, like Cole Beasley with the New York Giants. They bring him in, take a look see with him. All indications are he may come back on the practice squad. Let's not forget the practice squad is now 16 players. So you'll see players have some movement there that may have been cut in the past. You know, uh, it's going to be interesting to see if some of these former draft busts, like a Jalen Reagor, I'm hearing he's being shopped around um, by the Minnesota Vikings. Derek Barnett's not happy with his playing time with the Philadelphia Eagles.
Yep,
Will
we'll
he
get
be
into that.
traded?
Yep.
But Q most often, uh, I think teams know they're probably the top two-thirds of their training camp roster going into regular season. And then you kind of get they're going to see a lot of movement. It may have been cut down day, but you're going to see a lot of movement in terms of some of these veterans.
Yeah, it's pretty set, as you mentioned. Okay, a couple of names let me throw out there.
Sure.
Quarterback wise, Colt McCoy. So you got Kyler Murray on the PUP list. McCoy was a projected starter after spending last two seasons with Arizona. He went 3-3 in 6 starts. I think he's 10 plus year vet. He'll turn 37 next month. You got Nathan Peterman, Chicago. So the Bears cut PJ Walker. So I guess you would assume that Peterman would have been a likely backup to Justin Fields. Instead, they're going to roll with a rookie, Tyson Baggett, who I think a D2 quarterback. Zappy, that's a little bit of a surprise,
A
right? 2-0
surprise.
starter last
Mhm.
season, fourth round draft pick. Mac Jones struggling, questions whether, okay, is he going to challenge for the job? So, you've got a situation. I think Arizona's so in flux. That's why I think that's just a implosion waiting to happen. But little surprise, Fields is a quarterback that's gotten nicked up with Chicago. Mac Jones has struggled mightily. Belichick, this might be his last hurrah with the Pats. So there's a couple quarterbacks that are going to be looking for new homes.
Yeah, and they're the bigger names that we were just talking about. Surprised why not keep them around? And you and I, our last show, we talked about is Arizona tanking. Well, let me tell you something. When you trade for Josh Dobbs and
Yeah.
you're bringing him in right before the start of the
Yep.
season, and then you're cutting Colt McCoy. Not that Colt McCoy is some world beater or
Right.
anything. He's a veteran backup, but they have no plan going into the season. Kyler Murray, as you said, he's at least out the first 4 games of the season, and we're going to see if he's available to play later on. But they truly look like they may be in a Caleb Williams sweepstakes going all in there. And I'm also already hearing that Colt McCoy may be on the radar of the Patriots because, Belichick's like having that veteran guy. Going back to his days at the University of Texas, he was a winner and he helped out in a variety of places, including Cleveland and Washington. So he may be a guy that they could bring in there. But one of the other biggest surprises is some of the guys are just like, all right, leave them on PUP for 4 games, and then we'll bring him back. We talked about Murray, but one of the surprising ones to me was like a Vaughn Miller type. I thought the
Mm-hmm.
Buffalo Bills would try to get him out there as early as possible, but he's going to be on PUP, and teams are using that more wisely. And let's not forget Q. This is a marathon. it's 17 games, so they're looking at a lot of these veteran guys. Okay, we may not have them early in the season, but we can have them for the final push going into the playoffs.
Yeah, so the Eagles 53 initial. Hurts, Mariota, McKee, your quarterbacks, running backs, DeAndre Swift, Kenneth Gainwell, Rashad Penny, Boston Scott, which gives me sweats as a Giant fan. Your wide receivers, obviously Brown, Smith, Watkins, Goddard, Stoll, your tight ends. The only, I guess we can sit there and say, the somewhat surprise. Let me get to the linebackers. Your defensive ends, I mean, Reddick, Sweat, Graham, Smith, Barnett, right now, Patrick Johnson, defensive tackle, Cox, Davis, Carter, Williams, Street, and then two other players. Linebackers, Dean, Cunningham. Your corners, you've got some depth. They don't have punters. I mean, that's the one thing that also stood out. Punters and kickers were getting cut, left and right. I mean, we know this is an ever-flowing type of thing, right? This is just where their roster stands, but any surprises with the Eagles? I know we talked a little bit about the depth at the tackle position, but you also brought up the linebackers. You kind of highlighted that.
Yeah, you had at the running back position, that was kind of surprised me. I know it's a crowded backfield, and Trey Sermon had did a nice job this preseason, and maybe they'll bring him back on a practice squad, but he was let go. Devin Allen, a guy they touted over and over again, an Olympic world-class sprinter, and maybe they could use him on special teams or whatever they have you. They also cut him, so he was kind of surprised. But they're defensively, the linebackers, I think I let go of the linebacker, one of the ones that they drafted only a couple of years ago. So they like Cunningham coming in there. We'll see if he's able to step in and be the guy next to Kobe Dean. Was Mara one of the cuts? Because he was a guy that was also on bubble. They brought him in from the Bears. I was wondering if he was going to be able to make the team. And then in terms of his safety position, uh, Edmonds, even though they brought him over from the Steelers, I heard he was kind of on the bubble as well. So, some of those guys may be on the initial roster, but you wonder, will they make it to game day and at week one?
Yeah, who'd you say?
Morrow, the linebacker they brought over from the Bears.
Waved. I don't see
I,
him
th- I
on
think he might have
the.
made the team because, Q, a big thing a lot is with these veterans, if they've invested a lot of signing bonus into them,
Yep.
they try to keep them around. Now, some of the other um, veteran type players that are value 1 year deals, you'll see these guys get cut, but you'll have them maybe come back after week one in week two when their salary is not guaranteed for
Yeah,
the season. So if you're on that opening day roster, your salary is guaranteed, which is a big play.
they're carrying three linebackers: Dean, Cunningham, and Ellis.
Okay, so Morrow did not make the squad. He's
Yeah,
he's a guy they signed him from the Bears, and he just was not getting done. They tried Miles Jack. He retired because he was probably going to be cut as well. And Cunningham was the guy that came over from Tennessee Titans. We talked about him after that Browns game. He made a lot of splash plays, and he's a big time player. So gives them a good opportunity. The Eagles also brought in. I thought it was a nice trade for them. They brought Albert O over
mm-hmm.
from the Denver Broncos, the tight end who kind of fell out of favor there, but I like him in terms of he's a pure receiving tight end, and they may be able to do some things with him and Dallas Goedert.
So I'm sorry, I stand corrected. Ojimo, they have him listed as defensive lineman, not a linebacker.
Okay, so Ojimo is probably going to be
So he did make, yeah,
in
he's on the
reserve or
roster. He's on the
something.
final 53. Yep, Morrow.
Okay,
Yep,
so yeah, and they'll
apologize.
probably he may go to injured IR because he was a little banged up coming out of the preseason as well. So very fluid situation, but you have Howie Roseman, who's the Eagles general manager, and all these guys trying to find players, diamonds in the rough. And they're going to fill out, let's not forget that practice squad of 16
Yeah,
players, and you can have veterans on there now too.
yeah, and Ojimo was a seventh round pick. You mentioned 249 overall. So they love that depth at the D line.
Hmm.
All right, how about this whole Barnett situation? I remember when he was drafted, all I heard was he's the next coming of Reggie White. I hear people trying to compare the move that the Giants made and what they gave up, and then compare it to Barnett. Scheme is different for every team. I mean, let's be honest here. So I mean, I don't I don't think Derek Barnett's not fetching a second or third round. You're not getting a second or third round draft pick. You might fetch a fifth or sixth round draft pick. I don't see a fourth round draft pick if they're trying to move him. But it is interesting because he just never really lived up to the hype. He just
He
didn't.
didn't, and he broke Reggie White's sack record at University of Tennessee. So everybody just thought he was so exciting player. Yes, coming out of SEC, but he just has not lived up to expectations. His biggest play probably was in the Super Bowl where he got Graham gets his strip sack and Barnett falls on it. So he'll
Yep.
always live in Eagles lore because of that. But in terms of his production, he's just not gotten it done. And he wants to be traded. So but we know all along that even though you're holding out or you want to move, area codes, they don't have to acquiesce to the player. And I'm sure we're going to talk about the biggest holdout in a few minutes, but in Jonathan Taylor. But you're seeing that in terms of if you want to get traded, it takes two to tango. And I
Yeah.
do think that Barnett will be on. Unless there's an offer, as you said, that kind of blows Harry Roseman away, a third round or fourth rounder, um, I don't think even higher than that, but something like that may be able to get it done. But I think right now he's going to be on the Eagles because, Brandon Graham, he had a good comeback season last year, but he's a little older. He's had Achilles injury 2 years ago, so they'll probably want some depth at that position.
Yeah, depth at the cornerback position as well. The kid Eli Ricks made the squad as well. So Jonathan Taylor, are you surprised the Eagles didn't make a move for Jonathan Taylor? And the other thing is, if they were really expecting to get, talking about the Colts now, a first round draft pick, uh, you know, I mean, is it just possible that maybe they never really intended to trade Jonathan Taylor?
Well, I think Ursay if and Chris Ballard, who's our general manager, if they got something that was palatable, yeah, they would have traded him because it just seems like this is a marriage gone awry. Right now, what they're going to do with Taylor is since they couldn't find a trading partner, they're going to have him on the PUP list, physically
Yep.
unperformed list. He'll be out the first 4 games with that ankle injury. I do that with air quotes because it was kind of a hold in situation, and they're going to try to figure out this from there. But I talked to some guys around the league, and nobody was offering that first rounder. I heard Miami came in with a pretty nice package, but it wasn't enough to get the Colts to pull the trigger. And we'll see how it goes throughout the season. And then trading deadline is somewhere around Halloweenish on the calendar, and we'll see in October if he's moved then. But right now, it looks like they're stuck together. And then you also look at the Kansas City Chiefs. Chris Jones, he's not happy with his contract. He's sitting on the sidelines. He's not in camp as well. So you know, as these teams start playing their games, maybe they'll get some urgency if they really need them. We always point to the Dallas Cowboys when Emmitt Smith was out. You know, they
0-2.
found that they needed him, and then it changed the whole course of their season.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I like the kid Taylor. He's a Jersey kid, Salem County. I mean, he's a heck of a running back, but it's just the way the market is right now. I mean, it's just the timing for the running back position. It's not advantageous for them. Um, and then the counter argument is, look, this is the contract that you signed. Playoff, play on it. But again, we've seen teams. It's not the NBA. The players don't run the league, right? The NFL is totally different. We've seen GMs, we've seen ownerships of squads of teams. They just won't budge. I mean, the Colts are another interesting team because you got a young quarterback, you got a new head coach. You want a running back to be out there, a viable option, because that's your quarterback. That and a tight end and a line, that's your quarterback's best friend. So I'm a little skittish when I look at the Colts going forward this year, because I thought maybe they were poised to maybe kind of sneak up on some people and win a couple games, mind you. Speaking of a team that it doesn't appear to be sneaking up on anyone, the Jets. So we saw Rodgers. He looked weird in that gangrene the other night. Series, couple series made the vintage Rodgers touchdown toss. I mean, I understand it was against the Giants backups and whatnot, and half these guys you're not even going to see on the squad. But what stood out to me was the Jets defense. I mean, it's just, man, if anything, they might carry that offense early on with that type of schedule that the Jets have. Would you make a Rodgers? And to me, it looked weird out there seeing him in that gangrene.
Just it's odd not seeing him in that the gold and the dark green of the Packers, and it's going to take some time to get used to it. But it's just a love fest at this point, Q. Between the fans and all his teammates, everybody's so happy, and we're going to see how the adversity strikes this team. We talked about their early season schedule and how it shakes out, and the teams are going to play. They start with Buffalo, and then they have Kansas City in there, and it's a tough schedule. So we'll see how it goes. But they're looking like that all-star team roster, and they have to see if this unit can gel. We talk about that the Eagles' so-called dream team that I covered so many years ago, and it just injuries and I started wondering, when you bring a Dalvin Cook into the mix, and Breece Hall seems healthy, is there enough footballs for everybody on this team? You have Garrett Wilson and Nicole Hardman. There's just so many names, and can the offensive line hold up? But right now, on paper, they're looking like they're a true contender for that AFC East division. But that's a very tough division, top to bottom. All those teams can compete. I'm looking at possibly maybe three teams coming out of the division going to playoffs.
Interesting. Tuesday edition of VYP with Q. Rich Quinones here. Lloyd Vance joining us from our good friends over Play to Get Sports. Labor Day is right around the corner. Check them out online. In-store shopping you can pick up as well. They are pushing that used golf equipment and so much more. The clubs, the drivers, the putters, the golf balls, the spikes, all there. 1450 Clements Bridge Road in Deptford, New Jersey. All right. The Trey Lance situation, everyone has their own thought on it, their own opinion. I still maintain this is, hey, Dak, you're going to have to turn around and look, over your shoulder. And everyone was killing me on a couple of the recent shows and a couple of the shorts that I posted on the channel, Rich Q on Q. Like, hey, man, listen, Jerry Jones basically comes out. He says they wanted to draft Jalen Hurts if Jalen Hurts was available, right? So that's kibosh number one. And the second one is, hey, look, we think Trey Lance makes our team better. Well, first of all, you got a backup in Cooper Rush there. You got a veteran in Dak Prescott. You got a head coach who I think might be dead man walking to Mike McCarthy, just like Rivera in Washington. I mean, your worst case scenario, if you're the Dallas Cowboys, if you got to go to Trey Lance, that means Prescott either really struggled or got hurt. Cooper Rush couldn't get the job done. And it's almost as though you're doing it because you're at a desperation, which means your season's already at a loss. So, you've had a couple of days, 24, 48 hours, kind of let it sit right now. I mean, is this a situation where the Dallas Cowboys actually, or Jerry Jones actually believes that for the value of Trey Lance, where he was drafted, they believe they can rub the stone a little bit and shine it up and see if they can get something out of this kid, a reclamation project, maybe down the road, maybe be that bridge if Dak doesn't work out? Or is this a situation to light a fire under Dak's ass? Or third and lastly, and I gave you a couple options, do they really believe that he can be the answer if Dak struggles, the heir apparent?
Yeah, Q, I started looking at their contract situation. So both of them, Dak Prescott and Trey Lance, are both signed through 2024. So they're going to have at least 2 seasons with these guys. And I think they're going to try to find a way to see what Trey Lance can do. Dak Prescott, we nearly led the NFL last year in interceptions, is very inconsistent. He got a huge contract at the time, but now when you look at it against some of the other contracts, it's pretty value. It's not too bad. And have they seen enough out of former fourth round draft pick? Has he hit his ceiling? And you're starting to wonder that because he just makes bad decisions in the biggest games. And Jerry wants to win now. We know this, but the thing is with Trey Lance, yes, he had a huge season as a 19-year-old winning a national championship at the 1AA level for North Dakota State. But he just has not done much ever since. And when I look at this, Q, it's almost like a mismatch to me because Mike McCarthy's a West Coast passer, a short precision passing offense. Kellen Moore was there before, and he's gone. He's with the Chargers now, and he was more about airing the football out and throwing it
Mhm.
downfield. Now they have Brian Schottenheimer, who it's more like a dink and dunk. They're going to use the running games more with Pollard. And when you use Trey Lance, you need a guy that's able to run the read option and do some things. So they may try to bring him in a package here and there, see what he can do. But if he plays, it's probably going to mean that Dak is hurt, or they finally decide, enough's enough, and we're going to move on from him. So, very interesting situation. I thought maybe he would go some other places, but I guess Dallas brought in the best offer, and they took it.
What So what's your definition of they believe if Dak can't get the job done? Like if they struggle early on, if they're losing games and his decision making is poor, or even if they're winning games, but not because of him and he's struggling, right? I mean, the Giants were 5-4, and Coughlin decided to bench Kurt Warner, 5-3, 5-4, whatever, and start a rookie in Eli. I get it, apples and oranges, but if you're Mike McCarthy, you need to do everything in your power to win games this year, make a deep run in the playoffs, because there's absolutely no way he can withstand another season of this team getting bounced in a wild card in a divisional round, or not even making the playoffs.
I would say around the first 10 games is your barometer. If they're going into that 10th game after week 10, 3-7, maybe even 4-6, maybe they try to jumpstart the team and put Trey Lance out there and say, Dak, enough's enough.
Over
You
Cooper
are.
Rush?
They seem to have brought him in for a reason. And Cooper Rush, we know there's a distinct ceiling. I know what did he go, 4-0, 5-0 in those games that he played, and the team rallied around him, but he's not a week in, a week out starter. So I think, yes, they would probably at that point maybe jump to Trey Lance. But what they're going to do probably is go with Dak. Cooper Rush will be listed as a backup, but then you'll have Trey Lance kind of in the bullpen ready to go if this season goes awry. So I know Dallas has very high expectations because they're another one that has a lot of great players on paper. I saw you and our buddy Omar going back and forth about that roster, about the talent on it, but they got to prove it. You know what I mean? And then they got to prove it
100%.
in the playoffs, because that's where
100%.
it really matters. And I still think the Eagles have their number.
Yeah, even though I'm hearing people say, well, Dak's own the NFCs, I don't care about that. That's not what we're talking about. It's a whole new year, man. And now you've got the Eagles adding so much cookies to the cupboard with the depth. The Giants quietly had a really nice offseason and draft. Washington, they believe in this kid, Hal. I mean, that's another thing. How about Washington? You learn that Ron Rivera turns around in games that they needed last year. Ah, shit, I should have actually started this kid instead of Carson Wentz. I mean, when you hear that, you're thinking to yourself that's malpractice at its finest. So I still maintain, and I got hammered for saying this the other day. I still maintain that Eric Bieniemy, he'll never say it out loud or admit it, but truth serum, he's gunning for Rivera's job. And if they're 2-5 and yet the offense is moving the ball well, he looks great. Everyone's going to love him. They're going to get rid of Rivera, and Eric Bieniemy is going to slide right in there.
And I think Snyder had a lot to do with who was going to play in there. They're paying Wentz all that money, and you know Mayhew, his or general manager. I don't know if that was his decision or maybe it was Rivera or something. But there were a lot of politics involved. That they wanted to truck Carson Wentz out there. They paid him a ton of money to come over the Colts, which I just thought was a huge
Yeah.
mistake when it even happened. And then the proof was in the pudding. He was just terrible for them. So it shoulda, woulda, coulda. Hal was a very good young quarterback coming out of North Carolina. We're going to see if he's able to live up to expectations. But in the preseason, he has looked good. I know it's just a preseason, and they do have some weapons around him that could get him into a comfort level. So in the NFC East, as we talked about, it's the first team to win 4 games in that division. Get to 4-2 in that division, and you'll probably win it. More than likely get to the playoffs. We saw last year that 3 teams made it out of that division in the playoffs, and it could happen again.
Yeah, listen, it's such a long season. I mean, I know we always talk about, teams struggling or getting out of the gate or jumping. I mean, Kansas City a couple of years ago, they were 3-5, and they sat at like plus 450 to win the AFC West. Everyone thought they were cooked, and then they went on a run and they wound up winning the Super Bowl. So I still believe the first couple games, but I also believe that with some of these teams that we've talked about over the last several months, the Arizonas, the Colts now with Taylor, Arizona with Murray, the Dallas situation, as if they needed another distraction, even Buffalo to some extent with Diggs and Josh Allen. I still think there's a little bit of a disconnect there. Miami thought they were going to get Jonathan Taylor. Now they got to, they'll have a good offense. But I just think there's so many different storylines going around with some of these teams. And we haven't even gotten to opening kickoff, by the way, which is right around the corner. I want to leave you with this and ask you, and I have to be very sensitive when I say this. We saw during the preseason a couple players get hurt, carted off field, scary moments, and teams just decided we're going to stop playing. Okay. We all know what happened last year, and good for DeMar Hamlin making the Bills 53-man roster. We were all watching that Monday night game against Cincinnati, and it was just terrible, horrible, horrible, heartbreaking thing to watch. Are we now, and again, I want to be sensitive when I say this, where let's say week 1, week 2, week 3, week 4, you got a gunner running on special teams and he gets knocked out and he's concussed, or maybe he's not moving, or maybe there's an issue and they have to put him on a stretcher in a scary moment. Are we now at the point where teams are just going to decide we're not going to play anymore? I know it's the preseason. I just had the conversation with my friend the other day, my buddy, because I'm like, it's a violent sport. It's a collision sport. I mean, ultimately, we're going to get rid of kickoffs. I just, and I'm trying to be sensitive to it because these players, it's their livelihood. Today was not an easy day for some of these players. They were asked to do everything in their power over the last several months. Everything that was asked, the 2 days, the training, the lifting, the getting out there, doing what they needed to do to perform, play in the preseason, play banged up, play hurt to try to get a roster spot. So I totally respect and appreciate that. But it's just like, all right, this guy goes down, this guy goes down. We're not going to play anymore. Now, mind you, it's preseason. But I'm just wondering, in the back of your mind, do you think if this happens again, we will have that same type of scenario that we saw last year between Cincinnati and Buffalo?
It's going to have to be a very, very serious injury, and something you don't want to see,
Of
where
course not.
where they see a guy's like, oh man, you know. And let's not forget, there are people in those uniforms. I know I talked to a lot of fans and they email me about their fantasy football, or even if they're putting some money on the game, betting, and this is somebody's son or their
Of
father,
course.
their brother. And yeah, if it's a serious enough situation as Hamlin's was, the coaches got with the NFL and they decided, no, we're not going to play this game. So you hope not to see that, but unfortunately, we've seen it over all the years. The train keeps rolling, and unfortunately, typically, if somebody's injured bad enough, they say, "All right, we've had our break. Go to commercial and then get back to work." And
Yeah.
it's crazy. It's unfair business. It's a crazy business, But these guys love the game. I've talked to a lot of them after they've seen serious injuries before, like about the Shazier situation. After seeing somebody that they're teammates with or their brother goes down, and there's like, oh man, that could be me. But they try to put that out of their mind and keep playing. But it's a tough situation for those guys on the field.
Yeah, fair points. Last word to Lloyd. Good stuff. All right. Give him a follow on Twitter at Lloyd Vance, our NFL writer, researcher, historian, of course, PFWA award winner, ESPN NFL former contributor, Black College Football Hall of Fame selection committee. He was down there in Atlanta covering the festivities as well. All right. Later on in the week, we'll start to tease the season. I know we got to get into week 1. We'll start to look at some of these odds, win totals, divisional winners. A lot of, let's just say, a lot of banter and probably disagreeing. You and I will be doing over the next 7
Yeah, our usual Well, I'll put it on me. My usual bad predictions where I give the kiss of death to
Hey
whomever that
man, I'm
they're
gonna be
going to
right
win the
there with you.
Super
Trust
Bowl
me.
or
Listen,
something. Like we said, it's a marathon, but it's
yeah,
fun always picking, who's going to be your
yeah,
breakout, who's going to be your
of
rookie of
course.
the year, all that fun stuff. And September 7th is going to be here soon enough, and you got Kansas City hosting Detroit.
Yeah, right around the corner, right around the corner, my friend. All right, kickoff 2023, fast approach, and BYP will have you covered end zone to end zone with all the sports gambling tidbits and, of course, predictions, insight, and recaps as well. All right, my friend, appreciate you jumping on a Tuesday edition of BYP. We'll talk next week.
Thanks for having me on.